Hello, John Hively here. Today we're going to discuss how the pharmaceutical industry uses political corruption to redistribute massive amounts of money from your wallet to the wallets of billionaires. So there are two ways that it is done. One is through taxpayer money, and then the other way is just through old-fashioned political corruption, which might include, number one, taxpayer-funded money. So, according to what I'm reading here on the AI overview, it says, yes, it's true that taxpayer funds have been used to discover new drugs, including since 2020. A significant portion of the research and development costs for new drugs are covered by public funding, particularly through the National Institutes of Health and other government agencies. For example, studies have shown that a high percentage of drugs approved between 2010 and 2019 had government-funded research contributing to their development. This funding often supports basic research, applied research, and even some clinical trials. However, even that is probably not entirely true. For example, this other study from the Institute of New Economic Thinking says that U.S. taxpayer dollars funded every new pharmaceutical drug in the last decade. And this is a 2020 article, so they're saying from 2010 to 2019, every new drug that was approved by the FDA, a pharmaceutical drug, prescription drug, was created with your taxpayer dollars. Now, so your taxpayer dollars go to the pharmaceutical companies. You're subsidizing their profits, just like your dollars subsidize the profits of Elon Musk's companies. Anyway, now that's not the only way that money is redistributed from it's an indirect way that your money is redistributed to the wealthy. But the other way is much more sinister. The U.S. has the highest drug prices in the world, the highest prescription drug prices of any industrialized country. And hang on a second. So according to, this is what it says, an official website of the United States government, the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation. And the article of this, the name of this story is called Comparing Prescription Drugs in the U.S. and Other Countries, Prices and Availability. Now, the U.S. has the highest prices in the world. In 2022, this is a recent story from last year. In 2022, U.S. prices across all drugs, brands and generic, so brand names and generic drugs, were nearly 2.78 times, so 278%, as high as prices in other comparison countries. U.S. prices for brand drugs were at least 322% higher as prices in other industrialized countries, even after adjustments for estimated U.S. rebates. Most new drugs were available first in the U.S. before being launched in other countries. The U.S. spends a higher and growing share of total drug spending on new drugs compared to other countries. And the question is, why? And the answer is because most other countries, if not all other countries, negotiate with the prescription, with the drug companies that develop these drugs with your tax dollars. So here's the whiteboard, and we're going to look at this real carefully. So first of all, you need to understand this. Why do Americans pay more for pharmaceutical drugs than all other industrialized countries? One is you have massive political corruption in here caused by Supreme Court make-believe. Like the Supreme Court says that a U.S. corporation, say Eli Lilly or AbbVie, their shareholders are all U.S. citizens, right? Wrong. At least half of their shareholders in many cases, and sometimes more than half, are foreigners, and they have no rights to even be, these corporations have no rights to even be heard, have cases heard in the Supreme Court, in any federal court, according to the Constitution. But the Supreme Court uses make-believe Like they'll say, all citizens of AbbVie and all citizens of Eli Lilly are U.S. citizens. That's a load of bullshit. So this type of political corruption starts at the Supreme Court. And then, of course, there are other ways, because the Supreme Court has decided that that these corporations have free speech rights with their cash. So you can talk, but they have cash that they can spend in the political markets. And according to the Supreme Court, their cash in the political markets are the equivalent of free speech. This is another make-believe story created by the Supreme Court that has brought about massive political corruption in the United States. So you pay way more than what other nations pay. So look at this. So you could have some corporation like AbbVie. AbbVie right now, as of today, was going for about $183 per share, and paid for every share you own, gave you $6.50 per year. Well, if you owned 100,000 shares of AbbVie, you were going to get $650,000 per year. And you have to be very rich to own 100,000 shares. If you own 1 million shares, they're going to give you $6.5 million bucks. Well, that comes out of your pockets. And then Eli Lilly, it's going for $757 per share, and it pays $6 yearly. The better deal, obviously, is AbbVie, by the way, if I were going to invest. Anyway, so if you own 100,000 shares, they're going to give you $600,000. That's straight out of your pockets. And it's caused by massive political corruption that they can pay this. And what kind of massive political corruption are we talking about? Well, get ready to listen to this. Now, this is the President of the United States telling us about 4 or 5 days ago, that he was going to use an executive order to lower pharmaceutical drug prices here in the United States. And here we go. But we're really going to listen to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Special interests may not like this very much, but the American people will. I am doing this for the American people. I'm doing this against the most powerful lobby in the world, probably the drug lobby, drug and pharmaceutical lobby. But it's one of the most important orders, I think, that's ever been signed, certainly with regard to healthcare or health in the history of our country. And it's an honor to be a part of it. And I'd like to ask Robert F. Kennedy to say a few words, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator in Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself, spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry too. I think they gave you $100 million. But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country.
So there you have it. That's why you pay way more for drug prices than pharmaceutical drug prices than everybody else in the world. It's because we have one of the most corrupt political systems in the world, thinly disguised as a democracy. It is an oligarchy. And that's what we've got. And you've just also heard, I wasn't aware of this, but the Supreme Court, each judge has a pharmaceutical drug lobbyist working on behalf of the drug lobby, so that you could pay billionaires vastly more money with your and have your taxpayer dollars used. And it's just a big scam. It's amazing to me. So anyway, that's it in a nutshell. Is you've got massive political Supreme Court corruption, making up stories to empower corporations, and the billionaires receive 67 to 100% of their income and wealth from the financial markets, stocks and bonds, etc. And then your taxpayer dollars are used. The corruption is the impetus for using taxpayer dollars to fund research for companies like Eli Lilly and AbbVie, so that they can give massive amounts of money to billionaires. Anyway, it's not the best weather today, but I would like to get outside. I haven't been feeling well lately, and I guess I could use some fresh air. I haven't published any of these videos in a while because, well, I had a hoarse voice. And anyway, all of you have a good one. Have a great weekend. Anyway, bye-bye.